The Wolf and the Shepherd. A wolf followed a flock of sheep for a long time, and did not attempt to injure one of them. The shepherd at first stood on his guard against him, as against an enemy, and kept a strict watch over his movements. But when the wolf, day after day, kept in the company of the sheep, and did not make the slightest effort to seize them, the shepherd began to look upon him as a guardian of his flock, rather than as a plotter of evil against it, and when occasion called him one day into the city, he left the sheep entirely in his charge. The wolf, now that he had the opportunity, fell upon the sheep, and destroyed the greater part of the flock. When the shepherd returned to find his flock destroyed, he exclaimed, "I have been rightly served. Why did I trust my sheep to a wolf?" The Hares and the Lions. The hares harangued the assembly, and argued that all should be equal. The lions made this reply, "Your words, O hares, are good, but they lack both claws and teeth, such as we have." The Fox and the Lion. When a fox, who had never yet seen a lion, fell in with him by chance, for the first time in the forest, he was so frightened that he nearly died with fear. On meeting him for the second time, he was still much alarmed, but not to the same extent as at first. On seeing him the third time, he so increased in boldness, that he went up to him and commenced a familiar conversation with him. Acquaintance softens prejudices. The Weasel and the Mice. A weasel, inactive from age and infirmities, was not able to catch mice as he once did. He, therefore, rolled himself in flour, and lay down in a dark corner. A mouse, supposing him to be food, leapt upon him and was instantly caught, and squeezed to death. Another perished in a similar manner, and then a third, and still others after them. A very old mouse, who had escaped many a trap and snare, observed from a safe distance the trick of his crafty foe and said, "Ah! You that lie there, may you prosper just in the same proportion as you are, what you pretend to be." The Boy Bathing. A boy bathing in a river was in danger of being drowned. He called out to a passing traveler for help, but instead of holding out a helping hand, the man stood by unconcernedly, and scolded the boy for his imprudence. "Oh, sir," cried the youth, "I pray to help me now, and scold me afterwards. Counsel without help is useless." The Ass and the Wolf. An ass feeding in a meadow saw a wolf approaching to seize him, and immediately pretended to be lame. The wolf, coming up, inquired the cause of his lameness. The ass replied, that passing through a hedge, he had trod with his foot upon a sharp thorn. He requested that the wolf pull it out, lest when he ate him, it should injure his throat. The wolf consented and lifted up the foot, and was giving his whole mind to the discovery of the thorn, when the ass, with his heels, kicked his teeth into his mouth, and galloped away. The wolf, being thus fearfully mauled, said, "I am rightly served, for why did I attempt the art of healing, when my father only taught me the trade of a butcher?" The Seller of Images. A certain man made a wooden image of Mercury, and offered it for sale. When no one appeared willing to buy it, in order to attract purchasers, he cried out that he had the statue to sell of a benefactor who bestowed wealth, and helped to heap up riches. One of the bystanders said to him, "My good fellow, why do you sell him, being such a one as you describe, when you may yourself enjoy the good things he has to give?" "Why," he replied, "I am in need of immediate help, and he is wont to give his good gifts very slowly." The Fox and the Grapes. A famished fox saw some clusters of ripe black grapes hanging from a trellis vine. She resorted to all her tricks to get at them, but wearied herself in vain, for she could not reach them. At last, she turned away, hiding her disappointment and saying, "The grapes are sour, and not ripe as I thought." The Man and His Wife. A man had a wife, who made herself hated by all the members of his household. Wishing to find out if she had the same effect on the persons in her father's house, he made some excuses to send her home on a visit to her father. After a short time she returned, and when he inquired how she had got on, and how the servants had treated her, she replied, "The herdsmen and shepherds cast on me looks of aversion." He said, "O wife, if you were disliked by those who go out early in the morning with their flocks and return late in the evening, what must have been felt towards you by those with whom you passed the whole day? Straws show how the wind blows." The Peacock and Juno. The peacock made a complaint to Juno that, while the nightingale pleased every ear with his song, he himself no sooner opened his mouth than he became a laughingstock to all who heard him. The goddess, to console him, said, "But you far excel in beauty, and in size. The splendor of the emerald shines in your neck, and you unfold a tail, gorgeous with painted plumage. But for what purpose have I," said the bird, "this dumb beauty so long, as I am surpassed in song?" "A lot of each," replied Juno, "has been assigned by the will of the fates, to thee, beauty, to the eagle, strength, to the nightingale, song, to the raven, favorable, and to the crow, unfavorable auguries. These are all contented with the endowments allotted to them." The Hawk and the Nightingale. A nightingale, sitting aloft upon an oak, and singing according to his wont, was seen by a hawk who, being in need of food, swooped down and seized him. The nightingale, about to lose his life, earnestly begged the hawk to let him go, saying that he was not big enough to satisfy the hunger of a hawk who, if he wanted food, ought to pursue the larger birds. The hawk, interrupting him, said, "I should indeed have lost my senses, if I should let go food ready in my hand, for the sake of pursuing birds, which are not yet even within sight." The Dog, the Cock, and the Fox. A dog and a cock, being great friends, agreed to travel together. At nightfall, they took shelter in a thick wood. The cock, flying up, perched himself on the branches of a tree, while the dog found a bed beneath in the hollow trunk. When the morning dawned, the cock, as usual, crowed very loudly several times. A fox heard the sound, and wishing to make a breakfast on him, came and stood under the branches, saying how earnestly he desired to make the acquaintance of the owner of so magnificent a voice. The cock, suspecting his civilities, said, "Sir, I wish you would do me the favor of going around to the hollow trunk below me, and waking my porter, so that he may open the door, and let you in." When the fox approached the tree, the dog sprang out and caught him, and tore him to pieces. The Wolf and the Goat. A wolf saw a goat, feeding at the summit of a steep precipice, where he had no chance of reaching her. He called to her, and earnestly begged her to come lower down, lest she falls by some mishap, and he added that the meadows lay where he was standing, and that the herbage was most tender. She replied, "No, my friend, it is not for the pasture that you invite me, but for yourself, who are in want of food." The Lion and the Bull. A lion, greatly desiring to capture a bull, and yet afraid to attack him, on account of his great size, resorted to a trick to ensure his destruction. He approached the bull, and said, "I have slain a fine sheep, my friend, and if you will come home, and partake of him with me, I shall be delighted to have your company." The lion said this in the hope that, as the bull was in the act of reclining to eat, he might attack him to advantage, and make his meal on him. The bull, on approaching lion's den, saw the huge spits and giant cauldrons, and no sign whatever of the sheep, and, without saying a word, quietly took his departure. The lion inquired why he went off so abruptly, without a word of salutation to his host, who had not given him any cause for offense. "I have reasons enough," said the bull. "I see no indication whatever of your having slaughtered a sheep, while I do see very plainly every preparation for your dining on a bull." The Goat and the Ass. A man once kept a goat and an ass. The goat, envying the ass, on account of his greater abundance of food, said, "How shamefully you are treated, at one time grinding in the mill, and at another, carrying heavy burdens," and he further advised him to pretend to be epileptic, and fall into a ditch, and so obtain rest. The ass listened to his words, and falling into a ditch, was very much bruised. His master, sending for a leech, asked his advice. He bade him pour upon the wounds the lungs of a goat. They at once killed the goat, and so healed the ass. The Wolf, the Fox, and the Ape. A wolf accused a fox of theft, but the fox entirely denied the charge. An ape undertook to adjudge the matter between them. When each had fully stated his case, the ape announced this sentence: "I do not think you, wolf, ever lost what you claim, and I do believe you, fox, to have stolen what you so stoutly deny. The dishonest, if they act honestly, get no credit." The Fly and the Mule. A fly sat on the axle-tree of a chariot, and addressing the mule said, "How slow you are! Why do you not go faster? See if I do not prick your neck with my sting." The mule replied, "I do not heed your threats, I only care for him who sits above you, and who quickens my pace with his whip, or holds me back with the reins. Away, therefore, with your insolence, for I know well when to go fast, and when to go slow." The Fisherman. Some fishermen were out trawling their nets. Perceiving them to be very heavy, they danced about for joy, and supposed that they had taken a large catch. When they had dragged the nets to the shore, they found but some fish. The nets were full of sand and stones, and the men were beyond measure cast down so much at the disappointment which had befallen them, but because they had formed such very different expectations. One of their companies, an old man, said, "Let us cease lamenting, my mates, for, as it seems to me, sorrow is always the twin sister of joy, and it was only to be looked for that we, who just now were over-rejoiced, should next have something to make us sad. The Lion and the Three Bulls. 3 bulls, for a long time pastured together. A lion lay in ambush, in the hope of making them his prey, but was afraid to attack them, while they kept together. Having at last, by guileful speeches succeeded in separating them, he attacked them without fear, as they fed alone, and feasted on them one by one, at his own leisure. A union is a strength. The Fowler and the Viper. A fowler, taking his bird lime and his twigs, went out to catch birds. Seeing a thrush sitting upon a tree, he wished to take it, and fitting his twigs to a proper length, watched intently, having his whole thoughts directed towards the sky. While thus looking upwards, he unknowingly trod upon a viper, asleep just before his feet. The viper, turning about, stung him, and falling into a swoon, the man said to himself, "Woe is me! That while I purpose to hunt another, I am myself fallen unawares into the snares of death." The Horse and the Ass. A horse, proud of his fine trappings, met an ass on the highway. The ass, being heavily laden, moved slowly out of the way. "Hardly," said the horse, "can I resist kicking you with my heels?" The ass held his peace, and made only a silent appeal to the justice of the gods. Not long afterwards the horse, having become broken-winded, was sent by his owner to the farm. The ass, seeing him drawing a dung cart, thus derided him, "Where, O boaster, are now all your gay trappings, you who were yourself reduced to the condition you so lately treated with contempt?" The Fox and the Mask. A fox entered the house of an actor and, rummaging through all his properties, came upon a mask, an admirable imitation of a human head. He placed his paws on it and said, "What a beautiful head! Yet it is of no value, as it entirely lacks brains." The Geese and the Cranes. The geese and the cranes were feeding in the same meadow, when a bird-catcher came to ensnare them, in his nets. The cranes, being light of wing, fled away at his approach, while the geese, being slower of flight and heavier in their bodies, were captured. The Blind Man and the Whelp. A blind man was accustomed to distinguishing different animals, by touching them with his hands. The whelp of a wolf was brought him, with a request that he would feel it, and say what it was. He felt it, and being in doubt, said, "I do not quite know whether it is the cub of a fox, or the whelp of a wolf, but this I know full well. It would not be safe to admit him to the sheepfold." Evil tendencies are shown in early life. The Dogs and the Fox. Some dogs, finding the skin of a lion, began to tear it in pieces with their teeth. A fox, seeing them, said, "If this lion were alive, you would soon find out that his claws were stronger than your teeth. It is easy to kick a man that is down." The Cobbler turned Doctor. A cobbler unable to make a living by his trade, and made desperate by poverty, began to practice medicine in a town, in which he was not known. He sold a drug, pretending that it was an antidote to all poisons, and obtained a great name for himself by long-winded puffs and advertisements. When the cobbler happened to fall sick himself of a serious illness, the governor of the town determined to test his skill. For this purpose, he called for a cup, and while filling it with water, pretended to mix poison with the cobbler's antidote, commanding him to drink it, on the promise of a reward. The cobbler, under the fear of death, confessed that he had no knowledge of medicine, and was only made famous by the stupid clamors of the crowd. The governor then called a public assembly, and addressed the citizens. Of what folly have you been guilty? You have not hesitated to entrust your heads to a man, whom no one could employ, to make even the shoes for their feet. The Wolf and the Horse. A wolf coming out of a field of oats, met a horse and thus addressed him, I would advise you to go into that field. It is full of fine oats, which I have left untouched for you, as you are a friend whom I would love to hear, enjoying good eating. The horse replied, if oats had been the food of wolves, you would never have indulged your ears, at the cost of your belly. Men of evil reputation, when they perform a good deed, fail to get credit for it. The Brother and the Sister. A father had one son and one daughter, the former remarkable for his good looks, the latter for her extraordinary ugliness. While they were playing one day as children, they happened by chance to look together into a mirror that was placed on their mother's chair. The boy congratulated himself on his good looks, the girl grew angry, and could not bear the self-praises of her brother, interpreting all he said, and how could she do otherwise, into a reflection on herself. She ran off to her father, to be avenged on her brother, and spitefully accused him of having, as a boy, made use of that which belonged only to girls. The father embraced them both, and bestowing his kisses and affection impartially on each, said, I wish you both would look into the mirror every day, you, my son, that you may not spoil your beauty by evil conduct, and you, my daughter, that you may make up for your lack of beauty, by your virtues. The Wasps, the Partridges, and the Farmer. The wasps and the partridges, overcome with thirst, came to a farmer and besought him to give them some water to drink. They promised amply to repay him the favor which they asked. The partridges declared that they would dig around his vines, and make them produce finer grapes. The wasps said that they would keep guard and drive off thieves with their stings. But the farmer interrupted them, saying, I have already 2 oxen, who, without making any promises, do all these things. It is surely better for me to give the water to them, than to you. The Crow and Mercury. A crow caught in a snare, prayed to Apollo to release him, making a vow to offer some frankincense at his shrine. But when rescued from his danger, he forgot his promise. Shortly afterwards, again caught in a snare, he passed by Apollo, and made the same promise to offer frankincense to Mercury. Mercury soon appeared, and said to him, O you most base fellow! How can I believe you, who has disowned and wronged his former patron? The North Wind and the Sun. The North Wind and the Sun disputed, as to which was the most powerful, and agreed that he should be declared the victor, who could first strip a wayfaring man of his clothes. The North Wind first tried his power, and blew with all his might, but the keener his blasts, the closer the traveler wrapped his cloak around him, until at last, resigning all hope of victory, the wind called upon the Sun to see what he could do. The Sun suddenly shone out, with all his warmth. The traveler no sooner felt his genial rays, than he took off one garment after another, and at last, fairly overcome with heat, undressed and bathed in a stream that lay in his path. Persuasion is better than force. The two men, who were enemies. Two men, deadly enemies to each other, were sailing in the same vessel. Determined to keep as far apart as possible, the one seated himself in the stem, and the other in the prow of the ship. A violent storm arose, and with the vessel in great danger of sinking, the one in the stern inquired of the pilot, which of the two ends of the ship would go down first. On his replying that he supposed it would be the prow, the man said, "Death would not be grievous to me, if I could only see my enemy die before me." The Gamecocks and the Partridge. A man had two gamecocks in his poultry yard. One day by chance he found a tame partridge for sale. He purchased it and brought it home, to be reared with his gamecocks. When the partridge was put into the poultry yard, they struck at it and followed it about, so that the partridge became grievously troubled, and supposed that he was thus evilly treated, because he was a stranger. Not long afterwards, he saw the cocks fighting together, and not separating before one had well beaten the other. He then said to himself, "I shall no longer distress myself at being struck at by these gamecocks when I see that they cannot even refrain from quarreling with each other." The Quack Frog. A frog, once upon a time, came forth from his home in the marsh, and proclaimed to all the beasts that he was a learned physician, skilled in the use of drugs, and able to heal all diseases. A fox asked him, "How can you pretend to prescribe for others, when you are unable to heal your own lame gait and wrinkled skin?" The Lion, the Wolf, and the Fox. A lion, growing old, lay sick in his cave. All the beasts came to visit their king, except the fox. The wolf therefore, thinking that he had a capital opportunity, accused the fox to the lion of not paying any respect to him, who had the rule over them all, and of not coming to visit him. At that very moment, the fox came in, and heard these last words of the wolf. The lion roaring out in a rage against him, the fox sought an opportunity to defend himself and said, "And who of all those who have come to you have benefited you so much as I, who have traveled from place to place, in every direction, and have sought and learnt from the physicians the means of healing you?" The lion commanded him immediately to tell him the cure, when he replied, "You must flay a wolf alive, and wrap his skin yet warm round you." The wolf was at once taken and flayed, whereon the fox, turning to him, said with a smile, "You should have moved your master not to ill, but to good will." The Dog's House. In the winter-time, a dog curled up in as small a space as possible, on account of the cold, determined to make himself a house. However, when the summer returned again, he lay asleep stretched at his full length, and appeared to himself to be of great size. Now he considered that it would be neither an easy nor a necessary work to make himself such a house as would accommodate him. The Wolf and the Lion. Roaming by the mountainside at sundown, a wolf saw his own shadow become greatly extended and magnified, and he said to himself, "Why should I, being of such an immense size and extending nearly an acre in length, be afraid of the lion? Ought I not to be acknowledged as king of all the collected beasts?" While he was indulging in these proud thoughts, a lion fell upon him and killed him. He exclaimed with too late repentance, "Wretched me! This overestimation of myself is the cause of my destruction." The Lark and her young ones. A lark had made her nest in the early spring, on the young green wheat. The brood had almost grown to their full strength, and attained the use of their wings, and the full plumage of their feathers, when the owner of the field, looking over his ripe crop, said, "The time has come, when I must ask all my neighbors to help me with my harvest." One of the young larks heard his speech, and related it to his mother, inquiring of her, to what place they should move for safety. "There is no occasion to move yet, my son," she replied. "The man who only sends to his friends, to help him with his harvest, is not really in earnest." The owner of the field came again a few days later, and saw the wheat shedding the grain, from an excess of ripeness. He said, "I will come myself tomorrow, with my laborers, and with as many reapers as I can hire, and will get in the harvest." The lark, on hearing these words, said to her brood, "It is time now to be off, my little ones, for the man is in earnest this time. He no longer trusts his friends, but will reap the field himself." Self-help is the best help. The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. A country mouse invited a town mouse, an intimate friend, to pay him a visit, and partake of his country fare. As they were on the bare plough lands, eating their wheat stalks and roots, pulled up from the hedgerow, the town mouse said to his friend, "You live here the life of the ants, while in my house is the horn of plenty. I am surrounded by every luxury, and if you will come with me, as I wish you would, you shall have an ample share of my dainties." The country mouse was easily persuaded, and returned to town with his friend. On his arrival, the town mouse placed before him bread, barley, beans, dried figs, honey, raisins, and, last of all, brought a dainty piece of cheese, from a basket. The country mouse, being much delighted at the sight of such good cheer, expressed his satisfaction in warm terms, and lamented his own hard fate. Just as they were beginning to eat, someone opened the door, and they both ran off squeaking, as fast as they could, to a hole so narrow, that two could only find room in it, by squeezing. They had scarcely begun their repast again, when someone else entered to take something out of a cupboard, whereupon the two mice, more frightened than before, ran away and hid. At last, the country mouse, almost famished, said to his friend, "Although you have prepared for me so dainty a feast, I must leave you to enjoy it by yourself. It is surrounded by too many dangers, to please me. I prefer my bare plough lands, and roots from the hedgerow, where I can live in safety, and without fear."